Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Before I Wake. So, this, of course, is a Netflix movie, and this is a Netflix movie where I had to take forever to find. But then once I finally did, I'm like, okay, I gotta see this film. I really gotta go on and figure out what this is. And man, when I did, just the overwhelmingly just like, oh my god, thank god I found this film. Uh, there's so many times where you really have to just sift through and go on and like search and find something, because I've wanted for the longest time for there to be this kind of movie, and voila, we have found it. Thank goodness. So really, my grading system would of course be like a positive thing. Like, I would say that this has to almost be like a very almost like epic kind of film, and some people would be baffled and confused by that, because really a lot of people are like, wait a minute, like this isn't like a big battle movie, this isn't like Lord of the Rings, this isn't like a big massive scale of a film. Why would you grade it the way it is? Because the story is just so like, if you just break it down as concept alone, the concept alone is so interesting. And so let's break that down right now. So we of course have Cody, who has gone on from foster parent to foster parent to foster parent. And so it seems that a couple named Jesse and Mark are to possibly be those very next foster parents who are to get this kid. Uh, and so I'll explain why this was all to lead to that moment in spoilers. Like, I just want to get like the nitty gritty of it out of the way. So all of a sudden we have both Jesse and we have Mark, who are going on and adopting this kid, Cody. And it seems like he's like very sweet and very nice and very polite. And so Cody is going on, and it seems that Cody is having trouble sleeping. And so we go on and we find out that Cody is taking medication to keep himself awake. I'm like, no, buddy, like sleep, man. So we go on and we have Jesse that's telling Cody, like, hey, like, go to sleep. You need your sleep. Like, come on, just like sleep, buddy. And we have both Mark and Jesse, who's really nice and everything like that. And like, they're trying to like create the best home for this kid. So Cody goes on and he is to sleep. And so all of a sudden, since both Mark and Jesse are still awake after Cody is asleep, all of a sudden they start seeing things that they would not have thought that they could have seen. All of a sudden we have them going on and having a butterfly just fall onto their hand. And they're like, okay, this is weird. And so all of a sudden there's butterflies all through the house, and they're just like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. And so Mark goes on and scrambles and gets like a thing of glass to hold one of these butterflies in, and then all of a sudden all the butterflies leave, vanish for some odd reason. I'm like, okay, this seems weird. So we go on and further in the film realize that when Cody is to sleep and when Cody is to dream, everything that he is to dream comes to life through his dreams. I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. So anything that this kid dreams comes in as to be real. And then Cody, at some point, if he is to have a good dream, there is also sometimes where he has nightmares as well. And we have Cody, who is to start to have nightmares about a character called the Canker Man, which we'll find out that there is a whole story behind that being. And and I was just like, oh my god, this story. I just like, especially when we get to the finishing touches of this film, I was like, oh my god, this is just like, ah, just wow, this movie. And I know people could probably turn around and hate this film, um, and whatever, but that's okay because I don't care. Like, I'm just like, man, this film, just it's a horror film, and there are parts that are to scare people, and they're actually, the way in which that they scare people in this movie is the better scares, the scares that you're not actually expecting to happen. And there is like some points where I guess you like, for other people I could say it's probably like they would get uncomfortable, but for me I'm just like, no, I'm just like, like what's gonna happen, what's gonna happen out of this. uh Man, just the visuals that are coming in this film, and just I was just blown, just just blown away. So yeah, um Before I Wake, wow, what a surprise out of nowhere. Uh, because I have never really heard of this film. Like, I have never gone out of my way uh, to really, like, I guess this was one of those where it's like, I was eventually having this film seek me out for whatever reason. Because I was like, I've always wanted this kind of concept. The whole, like, a person going to sleep and being haunted, like, is almost kind of Freddy Krueger or Nightmare on Elm Street-ish. But man, I was so surprised by this film. I was so I was so amazed by this. It was great, just great. So I think it's about time for you to like hear the spoilers of this movie. If you want to go out of your way to hear before ahead of time, before you go onto Netflix and conveniently watch this for the first time ever, I would heavily recommend it. So good, so good. Because like this is a feel good kind of thing after a long stretch of like, man, like, oh, this sucks. Oh, this so good to get a really good movie. Because it's very rare. So, with that said, let's go into that double five time territory. Let's just go into spoilers about this one because it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this movie. Yeah. Yeah, finally. Good God. I don't know how many movies I would have to go through and just be like, this one's a clunker, this one's a clunker, this one's a clunker. Like, Falling Down, for me, was a real fun movie. Um, but, like, not as good as a payoff as this one was. But it is what it is. So, Jesse and Mark. Jesse and Mark are to go on, and they are to lose their child because I guess their child had accidentally drowned in their tub, which seems kind of odd. Like, I would have wanted to know like the full story of that, but we never really get there. So Jesse and Mark are to feel tempted to just want to adopt a child because we find out later that I guess Jesse could not have another child. So we have Jesse who's going through grief counseling, and Mark didn't want to go to this grief counseling anymore. Um, Maybe because he probably felt that he probably has moved on and Jesse really hasn't. Not quite sure. They don't say it in the film. So Jesse's going and talking to this group who I guess had lost their children also. And Jesse's going on and talking to this therapist who is to be Peter, and like talking about that both Jess and Mark are going on and wanting to adopt another child because they've kind of already looked into it. And so we have Natalie that is to recommend Cody to both Mark and Jesse because uh, Cody, I guess, had lost uh, numerous families or things just didn't work out because we have a flashback or we have a starting of this movie where Cody is sleeping and we had his previous father, Whelan, uh, who is to have a gun by him and is to be running to Cody's room, thinking that he's probably going to have to finally do the one thing that he may need to forcibly do, and that is to possibly go uh, and let's just say take out Cody because Cody will possibly go on and when he is to have a nightmare kill people. Sadly enough, with this Canker Man coming. So Wieland is tempted to go on and run to Cody's room because the Canker Man is coming, and Cody is to wake up. So Cody gets re-put through the system. Jesse and Mark are going to adopt Cody, and Cody is the nicest kid in the world. Just going on, and we have it to where Mark is like having Cody, like, hey man, like, do you want me to take that little box of yours, and I can kind of like I can hold it for you. It looks like it's heavy, some kind of thing. So, but Cody is just like kind of like reserved with his stuff, and it's like, oh hey, yeah, keep your things, all right. So, but then Cody's like, well, like I'll give you my box. So it's like, my God, like little tiny like weird details like this is just like so everybody's so nice and loving and whatever. So we go on and we have Cody who is to supposedly go to sleep after he's to go on and kind of look throughout this house and kind of like find out what his room is going to look like. And we of course have uh, Cody, who is to love collecting butterflies, even so much so that he knows everything about them and is to have this book about butterflies. And so I'm like, oh my God, that's so like that's so fascinating. And so we go on, we have Jesse and we have Mark, who just like all they had of blinds was just these butterfly ones, and coincidentally Cody is to like butterflies, and so Jesse and Mark are just like they're holding their hands like clutching like so hard because they're like, oh my God, we're like loving this kid. So Cody is to go on and is to have a a box, and he is to have this like keeping awake medication, and he has this like pop. He has this beverage that he's trying to like stay awake. And I'm like, oh my God. So we go on, and so we have Jesse and we have Mark, and like the kid doesn't sleep. He just stays awake. He just stays awake all day, and so or all night. I mean, because well, either way, he doesn't sleep anyways. We also find out that Jesse is to have trouble sleeping also. And so Jesse goes and talks to her therapist about it because eventually, when Cody is to go on and finally be able to rest, it seems that he is beforehand is to see this picture of a kid named Sean, and so Cody's asking about this picture of this kid, and he's asking, "Hey, where's Sean at?" And Jesse and Mark, Jesse goes on and says, like, "Well, Sean's in heaven." And so Cody's like, "Oh, like that's where my mom went." Um, and so like Cody realizes what that means, and so he's like, "Oh, well, like it looks like your kid looks like fun." So we go on. We have Cody who goes to sleep and gets some rest, and so all of a sudden Jesse is kind of making her way down to get a thing of water, and all of a sudden she starts seeing this kid uh, running around the house. So Jesse's like, okay, that's a little weird. So Jesse was to think that the kid running around this house was actually Sean. And so now Jesse's going and talking to her like group therapist about like, yeah, I thought I saw Sean last night. And Peter is to go on and tell Jesse, it's like, well, here's the thing. I think what had happened is that because you have lost so many days of sleep, like you're having trouble sleeping, that your brain is like in a dream-like state even when you're still awake. Because if you continue to not go and sleep properly, all of a sudden your brain will start to try and tell you something even while you're awake. Like try to process something or try to like help your way through something like in a dreamlike state while you're still even awake. So I'm like, okay, that's a fascinating thing that I'm sure is going to happen to foreshadow something that's going on with Cody. So we go on and we continue to like we have Jess who's telling Cody that she's to go and find Cody having sleep medication. And Jess is talking to Mark and she says, "You know what? I kind of feel bad that I like was to ask him about the sleep medication to keep like cuz his kid is like staying awake. Like I felt like I was snooping." And Mark's like, "No, you were parenting. Like it was the right thing to do. Like it was the right call." So, but Jesse goes and talks to Cody about it, and she's like, "Hey, like, go to sleep. Like, everything's fine here." Like, uh, so Cody goes to sleep, and so both Mark and Jesse, like, Jesse's kind of falling asleep in Mark's arms, and so all of a sudden, we have Mark wake up to a butterfly just kind of flying in the room, and all of a sudden, butterflies start flying around the room. So Mark is like, "Oh my god, like we gotta get a jar. We gotta we gotta grab these. Like how is it that we're getting butterflies right now? Where are they all coming from?" As there's to be this like screen door that supposedly opens. So all of a sudden Mark is trying to get this glass and try to grab one of these butterflies so he can keep them for Cody, realizing how much Cody loves butterflies. So we go on here and all of a sudden like they're seeing just swarms of butterflies that are all in this house and like, oh my god, what's going on? So all of a sudden Jess is to be bitten by one of these bugs, and so this bug just kind of like leaves off. She's like, oh my god, I got bitten by one of these. And Mark's like, bitten, huh? So all of a sudden we have it to where Cody is to wake up and everything just vanishes. The butterfly that's in the glass is all of a sudden now gone or disappeared. And Mark's like, what just happened here? And so Cody is to walk all the way down to where both Jesse and Mark are, and he apologizes. He's like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And so we go on and have Cody, who is to be up the next day, and so Cody's like, "I'm sorry," and they're like, "Sorry for what?" And so Cody is to explain to his parents, or his new parents, that whatever he is to dream becomes real. And so they're like, okay, like, yeah, it seems like that seems to be a reasonable assumption here. So we all of a sudden go on and we have it uh, where both Jesse and Mark are talking about Sean and bringing him up, and we have it to where they're also going and showing him a tape, Cody, a tape of Sean via some Christmas. And so all of a sudden, we have Cody, once he sleeps that night, is to all of a sudden go on and show us that event happening over again, with this kid going through and opening up this Christmas present. And so all of a sudden, both Jesse and Mark are realizing, like, oh my god, we can actually touch Sean. We can actually hug him. We can actually do Eskimo kisses. And so they're like, oh my god, like, this is, like, giving us the closure that we need. And they also had seen Sean once before, where they go on and try to touch him and hug him and whatever, and then he vanishes. So we're consistently having it to where now Jess is going out of her way to put a number of pictures of Sean all over the house, because Jess and Mark were once before trying to take all these pictures down so that way they can have a clean slate. But then Jess just wanted one up there to remember Sean, and Mark is like, "Well, are you sure? Because I thought we are gonna have a clean slate here." And Jess is like, "Just keep one picture," and he's like, "Okay, fine." So we go on, and so all of a sudden, Mark is to realize what Jesse is doing, and he thinks it's wrong. That it's like, hey, we can't use Cody's ability as a way to, like it's selfish. It's it's selfishly using this kid's power to project what we want or what we need and whatever, and it's very, like, it's taking advantage of this, and we should see this as a gift. And so we have it to where Mark is trying to do the right thing here. And so we go on, and we, of course, we find out between Jesse and Mark, as, like, at one point when Cody was in the bath, like, Jesse was trying to be very protective of him and make sure that she can hear Cody, like, in the bath. And so, because we go on and we find out that, of course, Sean had sadly enough drowned in this tub, and we'll get to know that here shortly when I go on and have to explain more events that happen in this movie. Because we have Jesse at one point who is like looking at this tub in the early stages of this film and just remembering the kid that she had lost, kind of replaying the events possibly in her head and being haunted by it. So, and at some point, Jesse's to blame Mark for them losing their child, and Mark's like, hey, like, don't blame me. Like, it was an accident. So, and we also had Mark, who was to, like, put all these kind of these kind of things there, so that way Cody, I guess, could grab onto the part of the a wall to kind of be able to get out of this tub. And so I was like, oh, okay, so they're just being overly protective. I get it. So these like metal bars. So for like anybody to just easily be able to get out of a tub. So we go on and we have it where Cody is to mention that the Canker Man was to take his mother, and that's how like Cody's mom is in heaven. And so now we go on and we have Cody, who is going to school, and it seems that things are going well. He's to find this girl sitting next to him who is to be named Annie, and it seems that Cody is to like to draw butterflies, and so she's like, oh well, like shouldn't that butterfly have like kind of an antenna? And so she helps him like draw the antenna, and so it seems like things are all going well at school until a kid named Tate is to arrive at school. Um, and so we end up finding out that Tate is kind of a bully. And so Cody is going to school, and we all of a sudden have Tate that's uh, kind of getting into like Cody's face, to all of a sudden Cody is to shove Tate and to get into school. So all of a sudden, because Cody really like hasn't been sleeping, we go on and we have Cody who's like, you know what, I'm feeling ill. Like how about I just kind of just like go home, or go to the nurses or something. And we have it to where Cody instead just kind of goes and is to take a nap during recess at his desk. So all of a sudden we have Tate wanting to come into this room while, of course, Cody is sleeping. And all of a sudden we have it to where, of course, Cody materializes or is to be dreaming about the Canker Man. Because we have Cody, who, of course, is sleeping, and the Canker Man is to appear to him in his bed before this moment and says that he will always be there. So we have Tate that is wanting to probably do something with Cody and to mess with him, and all of a sudden the Canker Man is to consume Tate, and Annie is to come into the room and realize what's going on, and so she starts screaming, all of a sudden waking Cody to have this kid be gone now. So Mark is to come and pick Cody up. She's like, "Hey, buddy, like what's going on?" And so Cody is trying to scramble to get out of school because he's like, "Hey, like yeah, I guess a kid had gone missing. Like I don't know much about it, but." So Cody knows what's going on. Cody knows what happens, but like no one would probably believe him anyways. So Cody just goes home, and so Cody for a day just pretends that he's sick. He just says, "Yeah, like I'm not feeling too good," and so Mark's like, "Okay, buddy, like just like yeah, just kind of like just lay in bed. Just it's all right. Like if you're sick, you're sick. It's all right." So but Mark is just kind of saying it's like, well, but will you feel up to kind of like do some shopping with me? Cause you know what, I gotta go and get you a bunch of cool stuff. I gotta go and like get you a whole room to kind of have you feel more welcome in your room, and we gotta get you some new paints and stuff like that. We gotta get you some new stuff. And so Cody's like, well, all right, like I'll go with you. So we go and we have Mark and we have Cody who are just kind of having fun here, and Mark is to install Cody's new bed, which is to be this like race car, and so they're like installing these wheels and stuff like that. And so we go on and we have Cody uh, that uh, is to like pretend that he's supposedly sick for today. And so Mark is just telling Jesse, it's like, yeah, he was sick today. And so Jesse's like, oh, are you feeling better? And Cody's like, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better, as he's going and having this purple soda, I'm assuming. I guess they didn't want any kind of sponsors here. Like they had a Pepsi or a Coke or something. Ooh, sponsor. So so we go on and we have Cody, who again is to fall asleep because he's getting more and more tired. And so what happens is we have it where Jesse is to go on and go and talk to this doctor, because I guess she's to be a nurse at or I want to say nurse, but like I'm not quite sure about that. But we have it to where Jessie is to work at this hospital, and she's talking about how her kid is having problems sleeping, and so the doctor is just like, well, like I think that this kid is gonna need some sleep medication because he needs to sleep. Like for a kid that is that young and he's not sleeping can do some real damage somewhere down the road. So like you need to go on and give him kind of like a Ambien kind of thing that's for kids, so that way he can go and get some sleep. But like that's just to kind of like start him off. Then he'll hopefully get like some natural like sleep, and then he'll be fine. So we go on. We have Jess, who gives, of course, uh, Cody some Ambien, and because we have it to where Jesse goes on and gives them some cake and some milk, but we really have it where Jesse is trying to give Cody a certain plate, as like Mark tries to reach for one plate and Jesse gives him another, and he's like, okay, this is kind of weird. So they go on and they take the plates, and we of course have Cody, who's using a fork for things, and Mark is like, ah, like professional. So they go on and they eat their food, and Cody goes to sleep, and we have Mark, who of course is like, hey Jesse, like you need some sleep, like go to sleep, like don't expect him to just give us like another amazing gift through his dreams. Just kind of just like let's go to sleep. So all of a sudden, Jesse instead is going and drinking coffee and trying to stay up because that's what she's consistently doing. And so this time around, a little bit different. So all of a sudden, we have this Christmas tree, and Sean, who is to have this very goofy looking present in front of him, and it's a little bit different this time around. And so all of a sudden, we of course have Jesse, who is going and walking over and seeing Sean, and it's like, Sean? All of a sudden, we have Sean that goes and barfs all over Jesse, and then the present that is to be opened is to be Cankerman, and Mark is scrambling to go and try to wake up Cody. And so Mark, like here's the awful part. Mark is trying whatever he can to wake up Cody, to the point of like trying to like jostle him out, so to speak, like hand to Cody, kind of waking him up. You would have thought they would have possibly like got like a thing of water and chucked it on him or something like that to just kind of wake him up. Maybe that would be the thing to wake him up. But like whatever Mark tries to do doesn't really wake him up. So all of a sudden, Jesse is scrambling to make it to Cody's room because the Canker Man is coming. So all of a sudden, we have both Jesse and Mark trying to close this door and stop the Canker Man from coming. But the Canker Man is coming anyways. So all of a sudden, we have it to where Mark is like, well, I got to defend this family. Like, it's the right thing to do. So Mark tries to go on and tries to fight the Canker Man for the Canker Man just to consume Mark. I'm like, oh my god! Thomas Jane! Like, they're killing Thomas Jane. Like, this thing is just consuming him. And I'm like, oh my god! Like, so, like, is this family just gonna be dead? And that's how they're gonna have to, like, resolve this thing? So, so we go on and we have Mark, who is now dead. And so it seems that we eventually get to have it be that Jesse is still alive and Cody is like still like he's really sorry about all that he has done and so on and so forth. So because we have it where of course Jess was to get knocked out by the Canker Man, and or Jess was to just kind of get knocked out, and so Cody is going and calling the authorities, and so it seems that social services is taking Cody, and they're taking him to some orphanage for them to take care of him. Yeah, go ahead, figure that out. So Jess, who's not in any like prison trouble, whatever, like she's not going to jail for anything. And so they go on and they ask, of course, Jess about this, because she comes clean. She tells them, like, yeah, I went on and tried to give Cody a sleeping medication because he had trouble sleeping, and because it was subscribed by his doctor, and so we go on and have everything kind of check out here. So Jesse seems to like is it everything's okay. So Jesse goes on and is to now try and research Cody, basically figure out everything that she can about him, figure out his past, family, and whatever. Like try to figure everything out, put the pieces together. So Jesse goes through, of course, Cody's records because she has that ability to get Cody's records. And so we go on, we have Jesse who is to find Whelan at this mental hospital because, like, basically from all the trauma that he suffered with dealing with Cody, honestly, left him just freaking insane, sadly enough. So Jesse's going and talking to Wieland and asking him, hey, can Cody bring somebody back when the Canker Man is to take him? And Wieland's like, well, like, I tried to do that once before, but Cody was far too young to remember the woman that Wieland was with. And so anytime Wieland was hoping that Cody could bring this girl back, it seemed like he could not get all of her back, and he only got her back for a brief time, and then she faded away once Cody was to awake, or was to be awake. So now we go on and we have it where Jesse is trying to go on and find out Cody's original mom's like information, something about her. trying to figure this all out. And so Jesse is to go on and find out some stuff via Cody's bio mom, and she goes on and finds this like stuffed butterfly thing, and she goes on and finds this journal. So she's like, okay. So now Cody is going in this orphanage, and of course he's trying not to sleep here. We also had a moment where when like kind of in the early parts of this movie, right after Tate was to be taken, we go on and we have Cody who is restraining himself from sleeping to the point where all of a sudden Tate is attacking Cody while he's still awake. And all of a sudden Sean is down talking to Jesse, saying that he's like, how is this happening? I'm awake. I'm awake. How is this happening? We have Sean telling Jesse this over and over and over again. So we go on and have Cody being attacked by Tate while he's still awake here. And so we have Jesse running to Cody, and Cody is trying to convince himself that he's still awake, and all of this stuff just fades. So now Jesse is to make her way to where Cody is to find out the Cankerman is starting to take people again and starting to put them in these cocoons to kind of keep them there. The Cankerman is. So Jesse is going on and is trying to make it to Cody so she can help him. And so Cody had been given a sedative for him to sleep, and so now so Cody is sleeping. So we go on and we have Jess, who all of a sudden is to start to see a number of things because Cody is making all these things real. So Jess is going on and seeing this tub in this orphanage, and she is seeing that Sean is in this tub and he has no eyes, and we have this tub full of blood, and Sean is just kind of rocking back and forth in this tub, and he's just like, it looks like he's drowning supposedly in this tub. I'm like, oh my god, this is some dark So then we turn around and we have Jesse that is to see a no-eyes version of herself going and at first seeing Cody, but then we have Jesse who is to mold Cody's face and to change Cody's face into Sean's face, which again is to be Sean without eyes. And so all of a sudden we just see Mark come into frame, and he has no eyes, and I'm like, oh my god, this is a creepy family going on here. So when Jesse is to finally make it to the actual Cody, she of course is to realize that the Cankerman is there also, as well as a number of things to spook Jesse, which I believe is to be either Tate or just a number of things that are really just to scare Jesse here. So Jesse, of course, is to get scared for her to all of a sudden go on and now need to face the Cankerman. And so we have Jesse who is to use the ultimate weapon against the Cankerman, and it's to be this stuffed butterfly that I guess was Cody's bio mother's thing. And so all of a sudden, we have Jesse who shows the Cankerman this, and so all of a sudden the Cankerman is to stop doing what he's doing, and the Cankerman is to slowly but surely start to fade, and fade into a Cody. And then we go on and have Jesse, who is to make it back to the Cody who is still sleeping, and so she takes him, and so she tells Cody to let everybody free that the Cankerman had tried to keep. And so all of a sudden Natalie and everybody is to get released from these cocoons. And so Natalie's running off with Jesse to say like, hey, like what are you doing? And Jesse's like, I'm taking him home. And Natalie's like, okay, freaking, like, yeah, you go ahead, you take this kid, cause yeah, like, this kid is a risk. Yeah, please go ahead and take this kid. So Jesse is to help explain things to Cody, because Jesse is to go on when Cody is to wake and give him this stuffed butterfly, and is to give Cody his mother's journal. And so Jesse, I guess because he was too young and didn't quite understand what was going on with his biological mother, so Cody was to say at one point that the Cankerman was to kill his mother, his biological mother. So we end up finding out in this story that that Cody's biological mother was to actually have cancer. And so that's like cancer. Like, Cody was, of course, to get confused by that. And so, and I'm like, oh my god, this is freaking amazing. And so we, like, it's a goofy thing, but it's so, like, anyways, so we have it where, like, Jesse is to say that this biomom was keeping this journal, and was to, like, mention all the times that I guess she was to see all these butterflies and so on and so forth, while Cody was pregnant with her, or let me say that correctly. Cody's biomom was pregnant with Cody. She was seeing butterflies, and so it's like, okay, that's interesting. So we find out that this woman is to go on and have cancer, and she ends up becoming, like, of course, bald and very thin, and I believe the bio mom is actually Audrey. And so this woman ends up becoming so bald, this woman ends up becoming so thin and bald that all of a sudden she is to almost look very similar to what the Cankerman looks like. And so Audrey is going on and having one last moment with Cody. And so Cody, from the way that his mother was to look when she was to be on her deathbed, and because canker is cancer, all of a sudden Cody is to take his mind and is to say that basically cancer was his villain. Cancer was his nightmare, and that it had taken his mother from him, and that it might eventually at some point take others. And so I was like, wow, this film, I can't praise it enough. Just the interesting just dropping of all this stuff. And so we have Jesse talking to Cody, and Jesse and Cody are in the same bed, and Cody's like, Jesse's gonna comfort Cody and say like, hey, like I'll be with you here the whole time. Whatever happens, we'll kind of deal with this when it comes. And so Cody is going on and is to ask Jesse like, hey, can you tell me a story? And so Jesse's going on and telling this story about Tate, who is to re-wake up back in his bed, and anything that was to make him a bully was to have all just faded away. And Jesse's to say that Wieland was to get his wife back, and that everything was going to be a happy ending for Wieland, and that Mark was going to be reunited with Sean, and that everything was going to be all right. And so Cody is like, well, like, do you think that any of all of that could really be possible? And Jesse's telling Cody, it's like, well, hey, you never know. Like, with how Cody is just to be able to do all this stuff with his ability, there could be no end to figuring out somewhere down the road what Cody could really do. Could possibly bring people back to life, much more so than just through his dreams. So that's the way the movie just kind of ends here. Like, at least it has like a kind of a happy ending. That would have just sucked if all of a sudden we would have just had this like gruesome ending where like Jesse just dies at the end. I'm like, man, that's a horrible thing if you had this like really like awful ending at the end of all this. But yeah, like this was such a nice and sweet movie, and yeah, it had that horror side to it, but like I was so like I was like, this film, um, and like I was just like I was expecting for this movie to not be something I was overall going to like. I thought I was gonna find problems with it. I thought I was gonna be like, man, like this is a long stretch of a build up, but like no, I enjoyed every piece of it, and hopefully I said and mentioned every little piece about it. And I'm sorry if I'm just really just going on and on about like, man, this, but yeah, like uh, to finally find a good film like this is very rare, especially if it's something that like uh, it's out of nowhere kind of thing. So, um, yeah. So I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Hopefully, I covered everything because at the end of the day, there isn't a lot of details about this movie, but there's always this like really complex, complicated thing. I think the only thing that I didn't cover is we had where both Mark and Cody were to go on and talk to this police officer and this detective, and uh, and so this detective was going on and mentioning that Annie had saw what she had seen about this monster who goes and grabs Tate, and now the detectives are trying to get words from Cody, and Cody goes on and like he doesn't really give him anything, and so Cody, once he finally is to start seeing in from in his dreams of the Canker Man, and the Canker Man is saying that I will always be there, where we go on and we have it when Audrey is to have cancer and is to tell of course, Cody, that she will always be there. Uh, we we go on. We have it where Mark goes on and explains to Cody after we have, of course, Mark talking to Jesse about this missing kid, and that Cody is trying to change the subject or try not to talk about it anymore. And so Cody's starting to ask, like, hey, like, how did your kid die? Like, how did Sean die? And so Mark goes on and is to tell Cody that, like, yeah, our kid sadly just drowned. It was an accident. And so that's, of course, when, of course, Cody is to start to see Tate and is starting to realize that even in his dreams, like, things will still come after him. So, like, yeah, cool. This movie was cool. I enjoyed it. So hopefully every little detail was in there, because I don't know, like, eventually I know I'll forget any number of things, and plus also this is kind of like the ninth inning, so to speak, for me. So, like, I think I'm done for the day. So that's great. It's good to leave on a high note, because very rarely do I get to be able to, like, speak this thing in English towards the end of my days. So with that said, definitely check out Before I Wake, and if you already have, because you're listening to this part, then, and a lot of people could go on and be like, yeah, this movie sucks. Like, a lot of people have a very vastly different opinions about, like, if I'm to say, like, oh man, oh, this movie, oh, just pop that cork for this one. And a lot of people just go on and be like, no, this movie sucked. Or, oh, like I felt blah 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 way about this film. But yeah, so if you went all the way through this and you listened to me just blah 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 about this whole film, let me know in the comments below how you felt about Before I Wake. So yeah, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Hopefully, I covered everything. So yeah, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.